tell us all what you think the difference is between being a mentor and a coach.
Yeah, so I get asked this question quite a lot. So mentoring, the easiest way to describe it, so mentoring is where you give people information. So a mentor is someone that has a lot of experience, has been involved in the industry, or has topics or relevance in terms of your role, and can give you information and offer you advice based on their past experiences and any challenges that they might have faced. Whereas coaching, slightly different, in fact, where you pull the information from the individual. So you're not telling them the answers, you're not giving them the information or the solution, but you get them to dig deep and figure out what's already within them to solve the problem themselves. I think the more experience you get, or sort of nowadays, the role I probably play is a bit more of a hybrid because of my experience and now the coaching structure. You can combine the two. One extreme is obviously life coaching, where they wouldn't give you any information, but what sort of we do more in our industry now with the knowledge is a blend of the both. So mentoring is pushing information, coaching is pulling information. Is that okay?
Thank you for that.
It's all right.
Anybody got any questions on that, back to Yvonne, or anything they'd like to share? Okay, I'll move on to one of our next questions. So one of the questions we've had is, do the panelists see a difference between technical women in IT and women in IT in general? I know there are many senior leaders in IT who are not technical and very few senior technical women. This is submitted by somebody who has been a technical architect for 30 years. So she's one of the technical women we're talking about. She does see a difference in the way the two roles are viewed, and sometimes the way technical women are treated by other senior IT women leaders. Sometimes with respect and sometimes with caution, i.e. some female IT leaders would prefer to take technical advice off a man than a woman. I'm curious to hear what our views would be on that. Caroline, I'm going to go to you on this one, if that's okay.
Yeah, in some context, I definitely think there is a difference, because I would definitely put myself in the camp of woman in IT rather than technical female. I have to say, I did pull a face at the comment of women taking advice from men, advice from a technical nature. I've never come across that. I hope I've never done that. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. I actually think that because women approach things differently to guys, and we sort of chat about things, even if it is a technical aspect, and are probably not as succinct and direct as men would be. I would have said that I'd actually probably, if I had a preference and had to make a black and white decision, more likely to take advice off a woman. But yeah, no, really interesting question.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that as well, because, and this is something Yvonne and I have talked about actually quite a bit, is that, men and women do think very, very differently, and their reactions will be very different. So whereas I wouldn't mind taking advice from a man, and I never have minded, I wouldn't specifically seek a man out for that advice.
Yeah, right.
Because we've got each other in this industry, I think it's really good if, us as women can get together.
Yeah, and probably adding the technical women in IT are even more of a rarity than the other women that happen to work in IT.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, one of the other questions we've had is, what do we think the key differences are between mentoring and line management. As a mentor, do you consider a person's performance against action plans or tasks that you might have set them? What does a mentor do if you think someone is underperforming? And what is the main goal of a mentor? And when do you know if you've achieved it? Helen, can I go to you and Yvonne on this one, please?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few questions there, but if I just take the first one, so the key differences between mentoring and line management. I think for me, when I'm mentoring someone, I'm there to guide and advise them, and I don't really set goals or measure performance in the way that line managers do. So I think line management is more centered around delivering departmental goals with more immediate outputs, where I think mentoring is more focused on the broader long-term professional goals. So I think the aims are very different, and I also think that mentoring is kind of in a different environment, so I think it tends to be more informal, more conversational, and I think as a result of that, the person you're mentoring tends to be more relaxed, more open. It's not a pressured environment in the same way that formal performance appraisals might be with line managers.
Yeah, I would just add, I think that's a pretty spot on description, Helen. It is not the role of the mentor to be your line manager and give you direction or measure your performance. That is your line manager. And it is more of a ad hoc type of conversation at the water cooler, phone call on a specific subject rather than your performance relating to your role. However, if you do with coaching, however, which is the slightly difference again, then they will challenge you and they will give you things to do because they're pushing your performance a little bit similar to a line manager, but it's not in comparison to your role. It's about you as an individual and getting you to perform, you know, how you can improve yourself as opposed to the function of your job, if that makes sense. And it's very different.
Thank you both. Okay, how do we overcome feeling guilty about using someone's time up to mentor you? I'm going to answer this first myself, if that's all right, ladies. I don't think I've ever felt guilty about myself mentoring somebody, because obviously that person obviously has a need, but I do understand, and I'm sensitive. I wouldn't say I feel guilty. I'm sensitive using other people's time up. But I think if you then the mentor and a mentee, you've got that balance. And as long as we still can achieve our work objectives, I don't think you should ever feel guilty about that. That's my opinion.
I completely agree with that, Helen. I think I've got that perspective, obviously, from both being a mentor and a mentee. And I can honestly say that I think I take just as much value out of the sessions as I hope my mentee does. And I think being a mentor has helped me to improve my confidence, my emotional intelligence. I think I'm a better listener. I think it's made me more decisive. So I think I am taking just as much from the sessions as the person I'm mentoring. So that, I think, is probably one of the reasons that I wouldn't feel guilty.
I don't think you'd find that question coming from a guy, just saying. It's definitely a woman thing. It's to do like, it's not just you know, it's just all how we're preconditioned, because we just worry about you know, taking someone's time, but you should never do that. You know, you wouldn't have, no guy I know would ever have a problem asking, so we shouldn't feel this, that we, you know, we shouldn't feel the same way.
What advice would you give to somebody who is looking for a mentor right now? That can be to all of us, I suppose.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I think the priority when you're looking for a mentor is making sure that you've got someone that you can trust, that is outside within your direct sort of stakeholders, so has got an unbiased view or opinion, so they're not influenced by people around you, that is more experienced or can bring something to the table that you and by the way, you know, that doesn't have to be female, it can be a guy as well. A lot of people think that you have to stick with the same gender, but if I think back to my sort of career, I've been in a male-dominated industry, so by nature, all of my mentors or sort of people that have menteed me or given me advice have been predominantly men. So yeah, so I would just really think about who it is that you want. Just don't be scared to ask them either, and think about what it is that you want from it. Because I've had a lot of people say to me, oh, will you be my mentor? Yes, but why? What do you need a mentor for? What is it that you're trying to achieve? What is it that you need to improve? What is it that you're struggling with? Because everybody just assumes that, you know, just by having a mentor, they're going to improve. But until they understand what it is that they want to improve or where they need the help, it's very difficult for the role of a mentor to actually give them that advice or support. So that would be my suggestion.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. And I think the other thing for me is having that rapport with your mentor as well. It's not going to work if you haven't got that connection and that relationship. And yes, okay, at the very, very beginning, you might not, but very, very quickly, you begin to understand if you've got that connection with your mentor, mentee, and I think that's a big thing for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, you've obviously got to be able to talk to this person and be really open with them and honest. And if you haven't got that, then there's no point if you're being guarded. I think it's also definitely got to be somebody that you respect and that can add value to the conversation. Again, otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that I would probably add to that is I think there's a tendency to assume that you should have a mentor from within your own organisation. And I don't think there's any rules to say, you know, that's the case. So you might want to consider other people, whether it's a friend of a friend, or even like at A&S, we've set up a Women in IT WhatsApp group, which is open to anyone, whether it's partners, whether it's customers, anyone in IT, and hopefully some of you'll be in that group. And so even if, you know, you're looking for a mentor, then reach out on platforms like that, or whether it's online, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone within your organisation.
So, Helen, do you want to explain how you became a mentor?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I was being mentored by Helen myself, and I was talking to Helen about a particular challenge that I was having, and Helen turned around to me and said, well, why don't you become a mentor? And there was kind of a split second where I thought, that's bonkers, because honestly, I feel like I left university about 12 months ago, and in actual fact, it was about 6 or 7 years ago now. But at the time, I was just thinking, what on earth do I have to offer someone else? And that was my initial first thought. And then once I got over that imposter syndrome and kind of realised that it could actually be something that I could do and I could add value, I decided to go for it. And we don't have a mentoring program set up at A&S, but I just reached out to our people ops team and said, I'm really interested in becoming a mentor. Do you know if there's any of our apprentices that would like a mentor? So they kind of put a message out to them, and just explained that I was really up for mentoring anyone, if anyone wanted any additional help. And thankfully, someone came forward. So that's how I ended up mentoring.
Great stuff. Thanks, Helen. Do we think bad mentors can do more harm than good? Personally, I haven't had experience of a bad mentor, so I don't feel I can particularly answer that.
You'd like to think if someone's mentoring you, if you've done your due diligence and you've tested them out and you've done your research, then you shouldn't get a bad mentor. It's a difficult one, isn't it? You know, advice is opinion based. So if you go to someone with a specific question, there is still a chance that they might have a solution that actually doesn't still feel right for you as an individual. So I think as long as you approach it and know that you're still true to yourself, and even when it is something that it wasn't quite the answer you were expecting, because sometimes you go for a mentor for reassurance and just to make sure you're going in the right direction, but sometimes they will give you a difference of opinion that doesn't either sit right with you or you don't agree with. As long as you just take that information and then, you know, don't necessarily have to action on everything they say, then I don't think there can be such thing as a bad mentor, as long as you approach it in the right way.
Thanks for that, Yvonne. Caroline, I'm going to pose this one to you if this is okay.
Okay.
Do you think mentoring programs can lead to greater profitability for companies?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I guess depends how you translate profitability and what role somebody's in. But I mean, for example, if somebody was in a role that had a revenue generating element at some part, even if they were a project manager and the project they were developing had a revenue implication, yes, definitely developing that person and meaning that they come up with better ideas, they're more confident to speak up about their ideas. I definitely think it could be profitable for the company. And also, that by and large, a company's best asset is these people. So if you're developing those people, then you're developing the company kind of en masse. Yeah.
Thanks, Caroline. Why do you think some people are afraid to put themselves out there and ask for a mentor? And I think this is to all of us, really.
I think the time element might come into it a bit, but back to the earlier question. There's somebody in my career that we were talking about this when we were doing our setup call. I would consider her a kind of ad hoc, informal mentor rather than somebody I sat down with and spent an hour with every month. And she's a really successful lady and has just been promoted. And I would say I probably wouldn't make that more of a formal relationship because I would be worried about her time. She's got 2 kids. She works at the opposite end of the country to where she lives. Not that matters these days. But yeah, I would be in the sort of taking somebody's time element as well. Yeah.
I think I feel a bit differently. I think as somebody who wants to help people as their mentor, it's made me open my eyes a lot more and realise when I've needed a mentor. Almost practice what you're preaching, really, and you know, taking your own advice. You tend to take it when somebody else tells you, rather than when you tell yourself to do it. So I think it's really important for us to be able to feel strong enough to be able to put our hands up and say, actually, I could do with some guidance, please.
I mean, it's like developing ideas in a team. You're going to come up with better ideas, bouncing things off at least one other person. And I think the same rule applies to this as well.
Yvonne, Helen, have you any thoughts on that question? I can repeat it if you want me to.
Yes, please.
So the question was, why do you think some people are afraid to put themselves out there and ask someone to be their mentor?
I don't know whether some of it is more, it's more of a time constraint thing. I think in the past I've not considered it because you're often working at 100 miles an hour and I think some people falsely assume that you're going to get actions and tasks to do off the back of it. And it's like, you know, I don't have the brain capacity for this. You know, I've got all of my development goals with my line manager, so I don't have time for this. So I think that's partly to blame. And I think you'll find that during effective mentoring sessions that isn't the case. You don't come out with a long list of actions that you need to do. So I think the thought of that can sometimes put people off.
I think just to add to that, obviously agree with what you've all just said, but there's also a perception that senior people are very busy and reluctant to give you time, and that's not true. You know, I would always help somebody if I felt I could add value to their career. And I think you've got to, you know, I think when you're starting out, you have this preconceived idea that anybody with a senior job title is unapproachable, but you'll find they're probably the most approachable because they've probably got more time than the ones that are, because they've got a decent team that they can delegate to do a lot of the tasks that we talk about. So don't be put off by, you know, if you find there's somebody just because of their job title or their seniority, don't let that put you off, because they're probably the people that are most likely to help you and want to help you, certainly if, you know, you've got a good relationship with them.
I think the other thing, we talked a lot at the last session about confidence and imposter syndrome, and I think some people could be, well, why would that amazing person want to help me? And so I think that could come into play as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think sometimes it's just about biting the bullet, isn't it? And, you know, there's nothing wrong with asking the question. And a lot of the time people really do want to help you.
And the worst they'll say is no, not now, or so, you know, there's no harm in asking.
Yeah, completely agree. So before I continue with some of the questions we've got, can I open it up to everybody else and see if there's any questions our participants would like to ask us?
I had just had a comment on the first question regarding do you think, so talking about women in IT and then the technical women in that division, and whether kind of women in IT would be less likely to take advice from technical women. And I was thinking about it, and I'm sure that there's no one who would ever like intentionally do that. Like, but I was, you know, we've been just talking a lot about imposter syndrome, and I was thinking how obviously tech is quite male dominated and women are more likely to be perfectionists. So maybe it's less that people aren't willing to listen, but maybe it's more about the confidence of the technical person, or even, you know, in a male dominated environment, maybe it's that people say you have two individuals who are both very technically good. Maybe it's that sometimes men are slightly more recognised for what they do than others, so maybe their reputation is something that precedes them, and so it's not going into a conversation that they're actively not listened to. It's just that there are other less obvious factors that are kind of shaping the conversation and kind of whose views are taken on board. Just a thought that maybe that could be something that contributes to it. I don't know if anyone has a response to that.
I think that's a really good point, Kat. Yeah, just as you were starting to line that up, I came to exactly the same conclusion about the whole confidence piece. And, you know, we all know how our male colleagues are, that and the sort of persona they exhibit, that they know everything and they're right, and the kind of forcefulness they put their arguments over. So if you have even if two people had exactly the same knowledge and experience, if you had the male persona versus the softer, less confident female one, those kind of body language traits could sway your perception of somebody. Yeah.
And just to add to that, Caroline, there's mentioned the word preconditioned earlier, and we are, as women and generally, all preconditioned to dislike and untrust confident, happy, successful women. Yet the more successful, happy and confident a guy is, the more we trust and like them. So because women generally they prefer to be liked and trusted, they won't put themselves forward because they care more about being liked than celebrating their accomplishments or being proud of their achievements, which is why we don't get women putting themselves up for awards, which is why we don't get women putting themselves up for promotion. So it's just because of the conditioning and the DNA within us. It's just not within our nature to do it. So we've got a long way to, and we are getting better. We have got a long way to go, but guys will never have a problem shouting about how amazing they are, telling everybody all of the technical skills they've got, all of the accreditations, yet women just aren't, they're just naturally not built that way to do that. So while we have come some way, for those, you know, for us to push it that bit forward, we have to have less modesty and more humility and try and encourage the younger generation not to be, you know, fearful, successful, happy, confident young women, and to embrace them and also push themselves a bit more forward, because, you know, the guys would think nothing of it, you know.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's difficult as well because our natural way of behaving is just to get on with it, whereas, you know, we all know those colleagues around us who will shout about everything they do and they've achieved, whereas we have the biggest tendency not to. We just sort of do it under the covers and say, well, yeah, that's my job. Thanks for that, Kat. Have we got any other questions from the audience?
Well, hi.
Go ahead.
No, go on, you go ahead.
It's just a really quick question about how much prep work you think is involved in mentoring, because obviously with coaching you have your set goals as you're going along the coaching route, but with mentoring you might have certain aspects that they just come to you to solve a certain problem. I'm just thinking, what would be a really good way of mentoring in that respect? Do you have to do the prep work beforehand? Do you have to ask them what the issue is, or do you just become available? What's the sort of the level playing field there?
Are you talking about being the mentor or the mentee?
Yeah, no,
So
being the mentor. Yeah.
Yeah, from a mentor perspective, I would say you're the one with all the information and the knowledge anyway, so there shouldn't be any prep work, because they're coming to you for your skills and knowledge. It's just the time element of it.
It's more in terms of how to help them focus on particular issues. So let's say they have a wider problem, such as I'm not confident, how do I tackle my male counterparts? You know, you might want to help them. How you have become confident has taken you a series of steps in your life, which is good to put action plans in place. I'm just thinking, you know, do you think that there's an expectation to do that, or is that more on the coaching sort of remit of things?
I personally would say that's more of a coaching remit, not on a mentoring remit, but that's just my opinion based on my previous experiences. But Caroline, Helen, you might have different views, I don't know.
I was just going to say the same, really. I think I would go down more of a coaching route with that. I feel like you'd probably need more structure around those sessions. I think when I go into mentoring sessions, you know, I don't do any prep beforehand. I literally just open the floor with a couple of questions, which first one is, how are you? And the second one is, what do you want to talk about today? And then we kind of go from there. So yeah, no prep work for me.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, when I've done some mentoring, it's a hard one because you kind of have the answers and it's easy to give them the answers. Whereas sometimes people have got to start to think about the issue themselves and see how they want to tackle it, because it's not necessarily your way is the best way, but they could have a better way. I always find it's quite, I guess, a bit precarious sometimes with the mentoring versus the coaching, and it's sometimes useful to have coaching tips with mentoring because you allow them to come to a conclusion rather than just give them the answer, because it's that whole concept of teaching them to fish rather than so that's where I'm trying to figure out what is in your advice, you know, how do we get to that beauty spot, you know, how do we get to that sweet spot of really being able to help them get there on their own volition without having to give them the answer the whole time.
So that is definitely more of a coaching type of conversation, and you can have that as a mentor if you feel confident to do that. And it is literally just changing the language that you're using, and rather than giving them the answers, you're using a third person or getting them to think about it and maybe giving them scenarios, but without forgetting the reason they're coming to you is as a mentor, not as a coach. So the reason they've come to you is because you have the answers for them, not because you want to, you know, teach them. But equally, they're both valuable, and you can just reposition your questioning and get them to think of it in a different way, or lead them to the answer themselves rather than just giving them the answer.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful in just understanding, you know, that original question, which is what is the difference between mentoring and coaching? I don't think it's a very straightforward answer for both. I think sometimes they do interplay, but it's quite good to just, I think, for everyone to just get that sense of it. There will be aspects of coaching that you may not be a coach, but you know enough to know that you've got to lead them to their own answer. And that sort of takes a bit of EQ as well, you know, and experience to know that you took a while to get there yourself, and what evolved to get you there.
And most line managers will coach. It's part of your job. That is what you do within your team, or so it's no different. It's just a different spin on it, if you like. It's sort of coaching in a formal way, or versus just what you're doing as part of your role and with you know, with your individuals.
Great, thank you.
And I just adding on to that, I think if there is any sort of work, I would say it's maybe afterwards, where you might have touched on a white paper or report or example to back up what you're saying, and you might just want to dig that out and send it over or something, rather than prepping in advance.
Thanks, Kim. Catherine, did you have a question?
Sort of, but I mean, I guess it touches more on the very much step one basics of what mentoring actually covers. And I know that we've discussed a lot of that already, because we've been discussing like the difference between coaching and mentoring, and the difference between mentoring and line managing. But I guess it's more like almost, can you give me some examples kind of thing? Like, what would you actually discuss with a mentor that you wouldn't discuss with a coach, or you wouldn't discuss with a line manager? Like, people have come to me before now asking about mentoring, or if I wanted to be a mentor. And I know that Yvonne, you mentioned earlier about if you're looking for a mentor, you need to know what it is you're hoping to get from that relationship. Well, what is a typical thing you might hope to get from a mentoring relationship? If it's not a stupid question.
No.
Can I just go first? Is that all right?
Go for it, Helen.
Thank you. I think for me, it's having that ability to talk to somebody who's not in that immediate circle of your work group. So they don't necessarily have to have an understanding of all the politics, the dynamics, etc. So they can give you a very independent view of why you might be feeling the way you are, how you've reacted to the way you are, you know, to the position you're in. And that's the big difference for me. But that's why you need that relationship with your mentor, because that you can have that open and honest conversation, and their response will be very unique and independent to you, because they don't obviously know all the ins and outs of the situation necessarily, if I've said that right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Did you want to add on to that, Yvonne?
No, the only thing, I mean, questions can be that's quite a big question in itself. You know, it can be anything. It can be something small. It can be something big. It really is dependent on you and your specific situation. It could be career related. It could be personality related. It could be culture related. It could be, you know, nothing's off the table from a mentor. You're going to them for advice on something that you know that they can give you. So don't think of it, it's got to just be in relation to one thing. It might be, you know, maybe not your problems with your boyfriend, but, you know, it could be a challenge with a relationship at work that you're struggling with, and you want to know why, you know, and has that person got any advice of how they've dealt with a difficult customer or a difficult colleague, or a, you know. So I don't think any table is off the table. It just has to be relevant to you and what you need from it.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, Catherine. Roxanne, do you have a question?
I did, yeah. Just a question around if there's a particular sort of stage in your guys' career or an age you were at where you think either you didn't have a mentor and you think that would have been a really useful time to have one, or you did have a mentor and you think it gave you sort of a real boost?
Yeah, so for me, I, on reflection, wish that I'd have had a mentor at the point at which I became a manager. Because I guess you get promoted into a management role, but you don't acquire the skills, you know, overnight to suddenly be a manager. I think I could have done with a lot of mentoring at that point in my career. And the reason I got a mentor when I did was because I'm in the process of doing a management apprenticeship at the moment, and one of the things that I have to sort of cover on my apprenticeship, in an area that I need to develop, is managing different people. And the challenge that I was having was I only have one person in my team, and I'm acutely aware of the fact that my management and leadership style is tailored to that one individual. So I always worry that to progress in my career, I need to learn what it's like to deal with different personalities and be able to offer advice and support to kind of different people. So I wanted to get something out of mentoring myself. And obviously to help develop someone else as well. So that's the reason I started mentoring when I did. But yeah, I do wish that I'd had a mentor earlier in my career.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Just to add, I think it's particularly important at key step changes in your career. So I think becoming a manager is obviously one of those, and that's a really good example. It could be changing business, going into a slightly different area that's maybe sort of you've got your own team and teams have been amalgamated, so you're going into an area that you're slightly unsure about. Yeah, wherever there's I think good to think about it at a point where your career is changing significantly. But equally, if you have one at the start of your career and then you carry on with them regardless of those step changes, then that's obviously great as well.
Thanks, Roxanne. Kirsty, have you got a question for us?
Hi guys. So I work in the recruitment side of things, and we actually recruit for you guys, but we also get asked a lot of the time from people the best way to kind of approach transitioning throughout the organisation and who they should be kind of speaking to and advice, specifically on the kind of women's side, and how they can kind of bridge the gap from their specific role and transition to more, this is usually on the technical side, by the way, but to transition more over to that, and who they should be speaking to, and kind of some advice. And I don't know how to kind of help them with that, to be honest, because I've kind of not experienced it. So what advice can I give to people for them internally kind of seeking out a mentor to transition without potentially ruffling feathers in their own team, if that makes sense?
Are you talking about someone that's within an existing organisation?
Yeah, that wants
to transition from one role to another role?
Yeah.
From a non-technical to a technical, or just okay?
Technical.
Okay, just sorry, I just thought because
sorry, I know I go around when I ask the question.
Helen, do you want to answer that one?
I think for me, from my own experience, when I moved, you know, around in those sort of roles, it is about seeking out different opportunities. So even if you're with one company for a length of time, it's about pushing yourself forward to say, yes, I recognise I might not be able to do that role right now, but giving somebody the confidence to have the confidence in you that you will get there. I suppose my own personal example would be I worked in insurance for years as an underwriter, And I actually got seconded to a massive IT transformation project, and actually stayed with that project well after we'd actually done the transformation, because within the transformation I performed a number of roles and were able to pick up those technical skills. I became a test manager, I became a user acceptance test lead, I became a development team lead, and yet I started off 5-6 years ago as an insurance underwriter. So it's seeking out those opportunities and having the being brave enough to just say, I'm going to try. That's how it happened for me.
Perfect. And who should these women seek? Should it be someone potentially on their existing team that can say they're already doing well? If there isn't potentially an opportunity there, like you had to show off your skills, or should it be someone on the other team where they are a bit more technical, that they can kind of go to advice to how to transition into that?
I think it's a combination of the two, personally. I think you need obviously the backing from your current team that can actually help you go and engage with those more technical people to champion you to get into that space. I don't know if anybody has got any other thoughts.
I mean, I've only taken throughout my career, I've actually taken more people from technical into a solutions architect role. So they were more of an engineer doing the fixing and the doing and everything else, to more of a design and solutions perspective. So they've probably gone more the other way. And that's more about understanding their transferable skills and teaching them more the soft skills that they might not have had when they're sort of behind the scenes. So it does go both ways. And I think the other thing I would just suggest is that they really think about the type of role that they want, because technology is such a broad term and there's so many roles in this industry and within any one organisation, some deeply technical, some not so, some are transferable to many skills, some not so. I mean, really, unless you want to be like a data scientist, or you don't need to be that technical to have a career in our industry in some case, in some form, and that's across the board. So it's there's lots of opportunity, and it's just about reaching out to the right people that can help support that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I know we were laughing about this the other day, but I started off as a nursery nurse, and I'm now in IT and I've been for donkey's years. So if I can do that, anybody can.
Kirsty, could I add to that as well? I'm a technical architect and I've had many years in IT. I started off as an engineer, worked for Cisco. So I've transitioned. So I'm still very technical in my role. I'm a technical architect now. I'm working on government projects, and I find myself in a situation where I can walk into the room and the only female architect there. But looking back through my career, I've just taken opportunities. So if I've really enjoyed doing something, or I've seen an opportunity, I've pushed myself forward. So if I wanted a role, then I've tried to better myself. If there's a new technology I needed to learn, I'll do online learning. And to be honest with you, with such a male dominant environment, if I want to sound sensible when I'm talking to an audience, then I will research. I'll make sure that I know as much as everybody else. So I think it's how determined the individual is and how much they want that opportunity. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I think being a woman in technology, you have to not prove yourself time and time again, but you need to make sure that you are at a similar level to everybody else, to actually get the recognition of being someone sensible. But it's taking the opportunity and running with it and working for it and working hard.
Thanks, Claire, for that. I think we've got a question from Cheryl.
Hi, hello. Mine's around just, I mean, we spoke a bit about how you go about getting a mentor, but literally the practical steps. Say today I want to go away and get a mentor, like, would you do it through your organisation? What if you don't know of someone that might be suitable yourself and you don't want to maybe reach out? What literally can you do? Like, if we ended this meeting today and I wanted to go and get a mentor, like, what steps could you do to get one? Find one, maybe, if you don't already know of one. I'm that keen. I'm like, go.
I can only give you my personal example on how I connected with Yvonne. I reached out to Paul, obviously our CEO, for people who don't know, and Paul put me in touch with Yvonne, because obviously Yvonne's outside our organisation, so it was absolutely ideal. Yvonne, I don't know if you want to add about, you know, how you have then become other people's mentors.
Yeah, I think it's, again, it goes back to depending on what it is that you want from the relationship. So depending on what you want the mentor for, I would start within your own organisation and look internally first, certainly from a mentoring perspective, because there'll be lots of people within your organisation that can potentially help. If there is no one within your internal organisation specific to your specific, you know, requirements, then ask people within your organisation if they know somebody that can help you.
Yeah.
Because there will be, it's all about network and, you know, connections, and somebody will know somebody. So if they don't know the answer, they might know someone that would, or give you a suggestion as to who you could go and speak to. But I would definitely first start with what you want mentoring on, and then look within your internal organisation first.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Leah, I think, has a question for us.
I do, and I'm very lucky to have Yvonne as my mentor as well. So my question is, how can you be the very best mentee? So I've not been a mentor yet, and I'm thinking I might want to eventually, you know, when I grow up. But how do I, one of the things, and it was my question earlier about feeling guilty about wasting people's time. So if I'm going to take somebody's time, I want to make sure that actually I'm being the very best mentee I can be for my mentor. And that might sound a bit weird, like, because it's supposed to be the other way around in a kind of weird kind of way. But I think, and it's how do you get the best out of it as a mentee, and make sure that if you are using somebody's time, you're using it really well, and that mentor feels that they're not wasting their time. I don't know who wants that one.
I'll start off on that one. So I think you need to be really clear as a mentor what you want to get out of the sessions, and I think you always need to be prepared to go in there and to kind of drive the conversation and lead it yourself. So I guess as a mentor, you want to be asking, you know, what is it that you want to talk about today? So I think from a mentee perspective, I think there probably is some kind of preparation, even if it's just thinking about what you want to go in and talk about, and what you want to get out of those sessions. I always like it when I see my mentee like taking little notes and things, and I think, yes, they're taking that on board, they're going to reflect on what I've said, and it's great as a mentor when you have your next mentoring session and you ask how you've got on, or how they've got on with particular challenges, and you can see that they're coming back and they're saying, well, I tried this and I did that, and so yeah, I think those are the key points for me.
Good,
Yeah,
right, Helen.
Great, Helen.
Thanks, Helen.
Have we got any more questions? I'm just conscious of the time as well. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question, if that's all right.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Would you ever be in a scenario where you have like two mentors, one for personal and one for career? Personal development and career. Like, I'm just starting out a role in a technical role, so I'd like. Could you find a mentor which is good in both? I don't know.
I don't think you can have enough mentors, but you know, to be like you for different situations, because they're going to bring different skills to it. Like I said before, each mentor has got a different set of skills that they're going to be able to add value to you for. Somebody at work is not going to know you personally, so it'd be very difficult for someone in the work environment to give you a suggestion or solution for something in your personal life, and vice versa. So from that perspective, you can never really have, you know, more than enough. You know, there's never sort of a specific number you can have. It just really depends on what it is that you want to achieve from it.
I think in technical roles as well, you could also, and if you wanted to go into a role maybe a bit more like solution architect, that's less about the hands-on tech side of things and a bit more about the stakeholder management, I think you could quite easily have somebody that's a bit more on the technical side of your role, and then somebody that's a bit more on the soft skills, stakeholder management, communication, that sort of piece, because the technical person is possibly not going to be able to then help you on the softer skills.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Larissa. Any more questions? Great stuff. Thank you very much for joining us today and listening to us and your active participation. And I hope you've got out of it as much as I certainly have. Any feedback, please drop us a line. Most gratefully received.
Thanks so much for organising, ladies, and thanks for sharing your time and everything. I hugely appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really helpful.
No problem.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.